So we're here to talk about the future of commerce. We're here essentially because of the enormous opportunity that's out there today. There was a statistic that was released yesterday by the International Data Corporation that figured that international e-commerce in 2014 will do $1.5 trillion in business. So online, $1.5 trillion is the opportunity that we're talking about. We can see that the winds of change are happening. So we still have e-commerce growth here in the US, of course, but that growth is continuing to slow while e-commerce growth is continuing to accelerate at places outside of the United States, roughly double. What I think is one of the most interesting investments that was announced recently was the World Bank invested $25 million in two international e-commerce companies, Lamoda in Russia and Defeaty in South America. Now, the World Bank's investment arm is tasked with reducing poverty. So what they're actually doing, and I think this is really interesting, so what they're doing in an effort to reduce poverty in developing markets is investing in e-commerce platforms, which is crazy. We're all here because we want to help our companies turn a profit, which we should be, but the possibilities when looking at international markets are even bigger than that because we can help potentially affect a change in these big, important issues that are going on. And interesting to note also, Defeaty, the South American company, had a previous investment of $45 million from JP Morgan, which is the biggest bank in the United States. So the biggest bank in the United States is invested in the same e-commerce company as the World Bank's poverty reduction arm, which is kind of incredible when you think about it. Okay, so it's being driven by mobile. 61% of US adults have smartphones, but 70% of the phones that are sold worldwide are features phones. This is something when I first started writing my book, I did not realize. These feature phones are basically the phones that we all had before the iPhone came out. So back in 2004, we had phones that could go on the internet with some rudimentary browsers. That's what the majority of developing countries are still using to engage in commerce. There's some statistics I feel like are so important to share. So in the world today, we have 6 billion phones for 7 billion people. And every single day, there are more iPhones purchased than there are babies born. If you add Android to that, it's 3 times as many phones as people. It's not hard to see where we're going there. Moving on. Recently, there was, a couple years ago actually, there was a study that was done that shows that globally, more people have phones than have access to toilets. And in Africa, more people have access to phones than have access to electricity. So what that means is that in these countries where the government can't necessarily provide the economic stability or the infrastructure for toilets or electricity, there are companies that are actually going in or saying, all right, we'll do without it, and through mobile are actually going ahead and bringing these economies in these countries into the current age of e-commerce. And next, there's these cultural challenges. Moving into new markets, we don't want to make a fool of ourselves. The next slide is where we think that Mother's Day happens. So Mother's Day here in the US is the second Sunday of every May. And as it turns out, Mother's Day, a popular sale event, is also a popular holiday internationally. So you can see, unless you are in September, the only month of the year where there's not a Mother's Day, if you're looking at running these types of promotions, it's really important to be working with an international partner or someone that can help you kind of wade through these things. So showrooming is something, of course, that when it first started happening, we started seeing this out there, it was something that we became really afraid of. But consumers are just completely changing the way that they are shopping. So they're bringing their devices into stores, and they might be checking reviews in your store. They might be checking prices in your store, looking for coupons, or asking for advice or feedback. That's all happening. And smart companies, like on the next slide, Bonobos. How many of you are familiar with the Bonobos guide shops? Okay, great. So they're fantastic. I took my boyfriend in there to go shopping. You go in, it's just like a showroom. They don't have to pay for the inventory. You try stuff on. We sat down with the ninja, ordered from the exact same website that you would go to at home, and he ended up ordering 18 items, full-priced items. We walked out of there with nothing in our hands, and he was thrilled. So taking these things that might seem a little bit scary and turning them on their head can be a great opportunity. And I encourage you, the next time you see something that makes you feel like, oh my God, what's going to happen to us now? Think about, okay, actually, cool, something new and different. How can we be the first company to actually take that scary thing and turn it on its head into a benefit for us? And then moving on, there's also reverse showrooming as well. A lot of people refer to Pinterest as reverse showrooming because what's happening is that a lot of people are doing their discovery on Pinterest, sometimes hours and hours of discovery on Pinterest, and then they're actually going into the stores to find those items that they found that they were interested in. And Pinterest drives more traffic than most of the other social networking sites combined. They are a huge driver for both offline commerce and online commerce. Speaking of online, offline, so Net-a-Porter this month, maybe this week, is actually going to send out their first offline magazine. What's happening right now that's of particular concern for brands and retailers is that traditional publishers are getting into the commerce game. So as advertising dollars are continuing to plummet and we're struggling with trying to figure out how we can monetize advertising on mobile, what's happening is that a lot of these publications, particularly fashion publications, are deciding, okay, we're now in the business of selling things directly. Of course, they've been doing specialized promotions in the magazines, and Shop Bazaar, for instance, has been around for a long time, but they are really gunning for it. Magazines are going for you guys right now. So what we need to do in response to that is actually start producing our own content and blending online with offline. So Net-a-Porter, in response to that, it's like, fine, magazine, you're coming after me, I'm sending out a magazine. That's the game that we're in right now. All brands are publishers, and publishers are brands. And it's all happening both online and offline. This other example is from a former client of ours called OlaPic, working with Coach to actually go and take social content that people were posting of themselves, pictures offline, and they pull it back online onto the site to show how people are styling items. They're making social content shoppable. It actually goes on product pages as well. So this whole idea of online and offline is continuing to change. The next model that's, I think, particularly interesting is the idea of mass bespoke or mass customization. There's a lot of companies that are starting to do this, a lot of startups that are taking the place of tailors or taking the place of ill-fitting brands' clothing. The sneaker companies were among the first to do this. I'll tell you guys something. My favorite companies to look at for innovation are the sneaker companies and UK supermarkets. For some reason, those two just really are looking at innovation, testing stuff out really fast, not just talking about it, getting it on the market really fast. So this is me, Adidas. All the major sneaker companies are doing mass customization, but that's changing right now. So there's a lot of startups. It started with menswear. There's Proper Cloth and Bespoke Post and different companies that are actually doing menswear. Men are easier to fit. Their shape is a little less curvy, but now we're seeing it in women's wear as well, where companies like Bow and Drape, which recently, last week, raised $1.2 million from Tony Hsieh's investment fund, they are doing customization for women. I met last week with a company called Poppy Barley, which is doing custom women's boots at like $250. Great, fantastic price point. And retailers and brands that can look at some way to get in that are really going to have the potential for increased demand. So to wrap up, all of this can be extremely overwhelming. We're looking at so many different factors, and there's so many different things that are coming into play. It's my full-time job, and I have a hard time keeping up. We exist as a company just to help people navigate through this stuff, but it's incredibly difficult. And so one of the things that we can do is look at the best practices, which are a lot of the things that are going to be discussed today. So we'll look at partnering with existing companies. We'll look at starting with one specific market. But there are things that we can do. In my mind, the most important thing to do is to just keep your mind open. Again, I want to reiterate the statistic that I mentioned at the beginning. The market that we're looking at is $1.5 trillion. So even again, here as in the US, our growth is slowing. It is increasing rapidly in other areas of the world. And the final slide, one of my favorite quotes is it's often attributed to Peter Drucker, but he stole it from Abraham Lincoln. What we're doing here today is actually figuring out what's going to happen in the future. So together, looking at these things, being here in this room and listening to the other talks, we're actually figuring out what the future of commerce is going to look like. I think it's very exciting. Thank you.